One of the top MAGA masterminds behind the literal supervillain plot to help Donald Trump radically reshape the federal government, known as Project 2025, publicly declared that they are waging a second American revolution, which will only remain bloodless if the left complies with it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. Starting with this one here, a deranged clip from Dr. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation and one of the grand architects of Project 2025. Again, the closest thing to a literal supervillain plot we have ever seen in American politics. This is what this unhinged lunatic had to say publicly.
That we are in the process of the second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
They are waging a second American revolution, they said, and it will only remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. In other words, if the left doesn't roll over and accept this deranged, sweeping, far-right, radical reshaping of the federal government, then it will be bloody. Absolutely unhinged from Kevin Roberts. By the way, he was the guy, I don't know if you recall, a couple of weeks ago or maybe a week ago, I did a video about this. He actually went on to MSNBC to be interviewed to discuss Project 2025, and I don't know why he agreed to do it. Very brave of him, but this is how bold MAGA Republicans are. These are not the cunning supervillains of Marvel movies or Star Wars or Game of Thrones. They're just out in the open telling Americans what it's going to be, banking on our short attention spans and our media's inability to cover things in perspective to just get them over the finish line, and we'll talk about that. In response to this, the Biden campaign released an official response. This is Biden-Harris campaign statement on Trump's Project 2025 leader. Again, that's Kevin Roberts, threatening violence. 248 years ago tomorrow, America declared independence from a tyrannical king, and now Donald Trump and his allies want to make him one at our expense. On January 6th, they proudly stormed our Capitol to overturn an election Donald Trump lost fair and square, something not even the Confederacy was able to accomplish. Now they're dreaming of a violent revolution to destroy the very idea of America. Americans do not want Donald Trump, a liar, a fraud, and convicted criminal who has said he wants to be dictator on day one, terminate our Constitution, rip away our rights, and is only out for himself as president of the United States. Joe Biden rejects Donald Trump's revenge, resentment, and retribution. Like the rest of America, Joe Biden embraces freedom and democracy, our shared values of honesty, decency, dignity, and equality, and believes respect for one another, giving everyone a fair shot, and giving hate no safe harbor is what unites us in the future we will build together. A great response. Now, I do want to focus on the violent aspect here for just a second, because again, it's not like political violence is the exclusive province of one particular political party or one side, but it is disproportionately represented on the right. It's disproportionately represented within the Republican Party. Political extremism on the right is just objectively a far greater matter of domestic terrorism than left-wing violence. And that's been reaffirmed by Donald Trump's appointed Republican FBI director, Christopher Wray, as well as a number of criminological studies. Basically, if somebody's going to commit political violence domestically, far more likely than not, they're a right-winger than a left-winger. And this appetite with respect to using violence to reshape the country, it's much more common in the Republican Party than not. So according to a recent poll back in April, 1 in 5 Americans think that violence may solve U.S. divisions, may be necessary. 28%, more than a quarter of Republicans, strongly agree that Americans may have to resort to violence in order to, quote, get the country back on track. In contrast, only 12% of Democrats felt that way, which is about 12% too high, but still not even half of Democrats feel the same way about violence as Republicans. Again, this is a disproportionate problem within the GOP, and we have to be objective about it. This is not really a both sides issue. This is one side has much more of an issue than the other. Now, getting back to Project 2025, that's something that, again, we all need to spend more time on, myself included. The Biden-Harris campaign just said they just launched a new website on Trump's Project 2025 agenda, and we'll take a look at it in just a second. Every single American needs to know about Trump's plans to destroy our democracy. And we're going to show this little clip here where they kind of scroll through it. So it goes into detail about it. We'll take a look at the actual thing itself. This is, again, JoeBiden.com, Project 2025. Trump's allies' 920-page plan to give Trump more power over your daily life, gut Democratic checks and balances, and consolidate power in the Oval Office. Here's a taste of Project 2025. Takes away reproductive freedom nationwide, uses the presidency for revenge on Trump's political and personal enemies, terminates the Constitution, consolidates power in the Oval Office, guts Democratic checks and balances on presidential power, gives handouts to the ultra-wealthy paid for by working families, and much, much, much more. And it goes into vivid detail. Each section, gut government checks and balances. Donald Trump and his MAGA allies will empower themselves to fire and replace independent civil servants across government with extreme MAGA loyalists. Trump wants to restore the power of impoundment. That's a big one that, again, there's so much crazy with respect to Project 2025. It's like it's sensory overload, allowing Trump to unilaterally withhold congressionally appropriated funds. So easy example, just to nerd out here. Previous presidents, and it was actually under President Nixon where this got capped, had this notion that, okay, Congress can allocate resources, can allocate funding, but the president can choose where that funding goes or to not fund certain things, even that have a congressional mandate. So, for example, if Congress says, X number of millions or X number of billions need to go to this particular function, and yes, the president is responsible for dispensing it, the president can say, no, I don't want the money to go to the Department of Education, for example, so I'm just going to hold the money. That was called impoundment. And then Congress said, actually, no, that's illegal. You certainly have some discretion about when, where, and how the funding gets to our congressionally mandated goals, but you do not have the power to not actually fund our congressionally mandated goals when there's congressionally mandated funding behind it. See what I'm saying? So the Republican presidents, of course, wanted to take this discretion, this some latitude, and blow it wildly out of proportion and effectively neutralize Congress. And Congress said you can't do that. Donald Trump wants to restore it. Donald Trump wants to completely dismantle key departments of the executive branch, including the Department of Education. And again, they go into detail. They break this down. You don't even have to read the nearly 1,000-page tome that is Project 2025, although I encourage you to do just that. Now, of course, the problem is very few Americans have heard of Project 2025. Voters haven't heard of Project 2025. How much have you seen, read, or heard about Project 2025? A series of conservative policy proposals aimed at reshaping the executive branch of the federal government if a Republican is elected president in 2024. Overall, 8% said a lot, 16% said some, 76% said a little or nothing. That's terrible, folks. That's terrible. Other polls from like Navigator Research, for example, go into detail, and they effectively say the same thing. Now, I will say, and I tried to find it, but Google searches, like Google Trends, where they track what people Google, Googling Project 2025 has skyrocketed in the past several weeks, and that's great, and we need to keep the trend going, and we need to get it even higher. Get the rate higher and get it consistent. People need to know about Project 2025. So to that end, the Lincoln Project, probably about 3 weeks ago, put out this ad, this minute-long ad, describing Project 2025.
They say Project 2025 will change your life. For once, they're telling the truth.
Donald Trump gets in for 4 more years. He's going full throttle.
Project 2025 is Trump's plan to make America different, less free, less fair, less American. It's a roadmap for total control. Trump's control.
The gloves are off. There are no holds barred here.
Not just of the government, of your life, of your body, of every one of your freedoms, of what you can read and say, and where you can travel. He'll round up American citizens, use the government to punish his enemies, put the crazy and corrupt in power forever.
It's 4 years of scorched earth when Donald Trump retakes the White House.
But he promises to only be a dictator for one day. One day, sure.
It's a great ad. It's a great ad, and it's very sobering. And remember, this happened, like Project 2025 was designed prior to the recent Supreme Court decision in which the Supreme Court of the United States, or at least its 6-3 conservative supermajority, effectively granted Donald Trump a blank check, cut him a blank check. He is immune from criminal prosecution for sweeping acts. They say, oh, just official acts, right? Except they give you no litmus test to determine what an unofficial act is. And then they say basically anything the president does, not just core functions, but anything within the outer perimeter is granted presumptive immunity, right? Basically, he probably is immune, but hey, there's a chance for you to overcome that immunity in court. Again, they give no test, none, to establish what that means, how you would overcome that. As a matter of fact, they say that, listen, anytime the president exercises authority that isn't plainly, palpably, blatantly outside the scope of his ability, then that's an official act. Right? Think about it. Think about it. They even say that when Donald Trump was president, when he conspired with his Justice Department to try to steal the election from President-elect Biden, well, that's an official act because that's the chief executive corresponding with his Justice Department. And that's a core function of the executive branch. Sure, he may have been using it corruptly, but that's not for you to say. That's not for us to question. That's the president talking with the Department of Justice. No limiting principle whatsoever. And they say, if you're going to investigate a president, potentially to prosecute them, and anything they do involves an official act, even if you're trying to prosecute them for something that's not the act itself, it just involves the act, you can't investigate or examine the act because you're probing into the executive's power, and we just can't do that. Well, what if we want to do it just to establish motivation? What if we just want to ask about what the president was trying to do with that perfectly fair official act? What if they were trying to do it for corrupt reasons? You can't do that. They have set the bar so high that the president is de facto above the law. Imagine how much easier it will be to affect Project 2025, to actualize Project 2025, given that the next Republican president will be so insulated from criminal accountability they can act with impunity. This is incredibly dangerous. The last thing I want to point out is, with all of that in mind, as Will Bunch points out, the media is failing us. A renegade Supreme Court has just sanctioned monarchy. The author of Project 2025 is calling for revolution and suggesting bloodshed if liberals dare oppose them. And here's what the New York Times opinion section looks like. Doing nothing about Biden is the riskiest plan of all. The Philly girl shielding Biden from bad news. The question President Biden needs to ask himself now, why America's adversaries are wrong about the Trump-Biden debate. They're making it all about Biden and the fact that he's old and the fact that he had a terrible debate performance. They're not even talking about Trump's terrible debate performance, Trump's age, the fact that more Americans than not believe that Trump is unfit for office and that Trump shouldn't run. They're not even talking about that if they want to fixate on the debate and its implications. But they shouldn't even be talking about the debate and its implications compared to what the Supreme Court just did and what Project 2025 and its leaders are publicly expressing. We're not inferring here. They're saying it out loud with a camera and microphone on. But even the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it, which is further proof that the media is not liberally biased the way that Fox propagandists claim. So that's where we are, folks. Again, the leader, one of the top MAGA allies and MAGA masterminds of this sweeping supervillain plot, is publicly declaring it a second American revolution and threatening bloodshed if you and I don't roll over and accept it. Let me know what you think in the comments.